Hello class, welcome back. This is Miss Gilbert, and today we are going to learn how to subtract fractions. Remember from yesterday's lesson that there are many different ways we can show fractions. Yesterday we mainly used fraction circles to show fractions, but today we're going to be doing something different. We're actually going to use fraction strips to show fractions. So if you haven't already, go ahead and look in today's learning folder, and there you will find some fraction strip manipulatives that you can print and cut out and use to follow along in this video. So if you haven't already, go ahead and print those materials, cut them out, and then come back and you can continue this video. So before we can learn how to subtract fractions, we need to know what subtraction actually is. Remember that subtraction is taking away. So let's say you love skateboards. You actually love skateboards so much that you have 5 of them. But then you decided to give some away. After all, who needs 5 skateboards? So you decided to give away 2. How many skateboards would you have left? That's right, you would have 3 skateboards left. We can show that as 5 take away or minus 2 equals 3. But maybe skateboards aren't really your thing. Maybe you like scrunchies. And you like scrunchies so much that you have 6 scrunchies. Let's say that you decided to give away 3 of those scrunchies to your friends. What would be the number of scrunchies that were left? So if you start with 6 and you take away 3, how many would you have left? That's right, you would have 3 scrunchies left. So we can show this as 6 minus 3 equals 3, because you have 3 left over. So the important thing to remember here is that subtraction is taking away. So if subtraction is taking away and fractions are parts of a whole, how do we subtract fractions? Well, to subtract fractions, you want to take away parts from the whole. So let's take a look at this pie here. This pie is divided up into 6 equal parts. What would happen if we took away 3 slices of this pie? What fraction of the pie would be left over? So let's go ahead and do that as an example. If we took away, let's go ahead and cross out 1, 2, 3 slices. What fraction would be left over? Well, we would have 1, 2, 3 slices left. So we would have, if we took away 3, we would have 3 left. And if we're talking about this in terms of fractions, we would say that we have 3/6 left, because 3 out of the original 6 slices were left over. So if you took away 3 slices of this pie, we would have 3/6 still left over. All right, let's take a look at another example. Ethan is making a birdhouse. He uses 1/3 of a plank of wood. What fraction of a plank of wood is left over? So actually, let's go ahead and divide this plank of wood into thirds, because it says here that Ethan used 1/3 of a plank of wood. So that tells us that he has this plank of wood divided up into 3 equal pieces. Let me make that a little bit more even. There we go. All right, and we can even, if we wanted to, make this look like our fraction strips by labeling each part as 1/3. All right, so here's his plank of wood, and it says here that he uses 1/3 of a plank of wood to make his birdhouse. So that we are, in this case, we are taking away 1/3 of this plank of wood. So let's go ahead and we can cross out 1/3. Okay, and that went to make the birdhouse. All right, so how much or what fraction of a plank of wood is left over? Well, we can find that out just by counting up how many thirds are left. So 1, 2. We have 2/3 left over, and we can show this in an equation by writing 3/3. So that's how many thirds we started with. We started with 1, 2, 3. Then we took away 1/3. That went to the birdhouse, and we are left with 2/3. So 3/3 minus 1/3 equals 2/3. All right, so now we're going to do this problem together using fraction strips as a model. So try this, 9/10 minus 7/10. All right, so what are we starting with? We are starting with 9/10, so let's just go ahead, oops, and highlight that. Almost the whole thing. All right, so we're just going to highlight this all in. All right, so this is what we are taking away from. We are, this last 1/10 over here, we don't need to worry about because that is not what we are subtracting from. We are subtracting from this 9/10 right here. So we're starting with this 9/10 and then we need to take 7/10 away. So you can just kind of forget about this part over here. If you were using fraction strips, what you would want to do is you would just want to line up 9 of these little 10 pieces together. And then you could just take 7 of them away. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're starting with 9/10 and now we're taking away 7/10. Let's go ahead and cross them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if we start with 9/10 and we take away 7, we end up with 1 2/10 left. All right, let's look at another example, and this time it's your turn. Go ahead and pause this video and use your fraction strips to see if you can solve this problem. When you're done, play the video and we'll do it together. All right, you're back. So let's go ahead and try to solve this together. So it says here 6/8 minus 3/8 equals what? So let's go ahead and shade this in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. So we are starting with 6/8. And then it wants us to take 3 away. It wants us to take away 3/8. So 1, 2, 3/8. How many eighths of the ones we shaded in are left over? All we have to do is count them up. So we count them up and it'd be 1, 2, 3/8 are left over. All right. Here is our last example. Go ahead and pause this video, get out your fraction strips, and see if you can solve this problem, and then you can play this video and we'll do it together. All right, you're back. How did it go? Let's go ahead and try to solve this together. So we're starting with 3/5 of this fraction strip. So we're just going to go ahead and shade in 3. Okay. And then what happens if we are to take 2/5 away? So 3/5 and then we're going to subtract 2/5. So take away 1, take away 2, That leaves 1/5 left over. All right, so hopefully at this point, you might have noticed a pattern for when we're subtracting fractions. And this pattern leads us to the number one rule for subtracting fractions. Remember, we had a number one rule for adding fractions, and that was you want to add the numerators and not the denominators. Well, it turns out the rule for subtracting fractions is very similar. Can you guess what it is? Let me give you a hint. So let's take a look here at this last problem that we did. All right, let's take a look at the top and the bottom as well. What do you notice about the top? And then what do you notice about the bottom? Is the bottom any different than the top? Are the numerators any different than denominators? How so? Well, you might have noticed that 3 minus 2 equals 1, but 5 minus 5 does not equal 5. So what that should tell you is that when we subtract fractions, we subtract the numerators and not the denominators. So it turns out that is the number one rule for subtracting fractions, and it's very similar to the number one rule for adding fractions. You only want to ever add or subtract the numerator, not the denominator. Because remember, the denominator tells us what type of fraction it is. It tells us what type of fraction we're adding or subtracting, and we don't want to change it. All right, so that's all we have for today on subtracting fractions. Don't forget to do your homework, just to complete the worksheet and submit it in the Google Classroom.